If you want to roleplay as the last airbender in Baldurs Gate 3, then the Monk class is for you. These melee-focused strikers are a great class in Baldurs Gate 3, sporting unique melee attacks, unique spells, and just a grand old good time, really. So let's break it all down. Let me know in the comments if you're playing as a monk and what you think of the last class that was added to Baldurs Gate 3. And these class guides are designed to teach you the mechanics of a class and everything you need to know to succeed. I'll have a link to that playlist right here. So the monk. Now this was the last class that was added to Baldurs Gate 3, and they're actually really unique mainly because of their key mechanics. So monks have this like key point system, which is how you will use a lot of your unique mechanics within this class. And for the most part, that is using these unarmed attacks that can either make enemies prone or just give you like a flurry of blows, or in one of the subclasses you can actually use it to cast like a various amount of spells as well. So there's flexibility, but that key resource will be the key aspect of your kit. Didn't mean to pun there, but it's sort of the main focus of the monk class. And typically you'll also have some sort of a quarterstaff weapon which you may use occasionally to generate yourself an extra bonus attack, or just in general in combat. But for the most part, as a monk, dexterity will be your primary stat, and they have unarmored defense similar to the barbarian in that your body is resilient as armor, so you won't be wearing armor typically, so you can add your constitution modifier to your armor class, so keep that in mind when you're picking your ability points, as well as the unarmored movement. So when you're not wearing armor, you also have an increase to your overall movement speed. So there's a lot of interesting things about the monk that makes them a fun class to play and very unique compared to the other classes in the game. So let's break it down, starting with the races. Now obviously roleplay considerations here, but proficiencies don't really matter because you've already got simple weapon proficiencies for your quarterstaffs, which is the most part of like weapon usage that you'll use. You're not going to wear any armor because of unarmored movement and defense, so armor proficiencies don't matter here. Dark vision doesn't really matter that much either because you probably won't be ranged really ever as a monk, even in one of the subclasses that have some ranged spells. So really you can sort of just pick whatever is like works for you. Like Half-Orc is maybe like the min-maxed option because of the endurance as well as Sevin's attacks, but for the most part there's a lot of freedom to who you want to play as a monk. In terms of best skills, I'd probably be focusing on the dexterity skills like stealth, acrobats, and sleight of hand, though you will have a decent amount of wisdom if you are going the 4 elements spellcasting subclass, so the wisdom skills would honestly not be too bad, but just take that into consideration. And when looking at your ability points, there's a couple of things to consider. Now we're going to talk about subclasses next, so just keep that in mind, but when you're deciding on what to pick for your ability points, wisdom as your spellcasting modifier, you will need some wisdom if you're going the 4 elements, say the ranged like options, like in terms of its spells subclass, so you might need some wisdom there. But if you're not going that route, you're just going to focus on the martial aspects of the monk, then the dexterity. Strength is also important, especially if we're going to pick up the tavern brawler feat, but then obviously constitution for your health, as well as adding your constitution modifier to your armor class. So you definitely want to make sure you've got a solid amount of constitution. But speaking of those subclasses, at level 3 you'll pick between the Way of the Open Hand, the Way of the Shadow, and the Way of the 4 Elements. The Way of the Open Hand specializes in that unarmed combat, sort of enhancing your flurry of blows to add different effects to them. Say, for example, maybe making a target prone or stunning them, or adding effects to your flurry of blows sort of attacks. The Way of the Shadow is a stealth-orientated subclass that gives you access to stealth focus like spells and cantrips like Dark Vision, Darkness, Pass Without a Trace, those sort of things that allow you to essentially play like a ninja sort of a role. The Way of the 4 Elements gives you access to some unique monk spells that are based around the 4 elements that you can then use in combat. So you can use something like a Water Whip to like pull enemies towards you while dealing water damage, or some sort of like fire hand attack. There's like lots of different options in the 4 elements, but they are essentially enhancing those martial aspects of the monk with some sort of elemental spells and that sort of a thing. Picking an option here is a little up to you, obviously, and I would either say to go the Open Hand to enhance your flurry of blows if you want to focus on those martial aspects, or 4 elements, as I really actually do like the spell sort of elements that come with the 4 elements kits and the different spells you get access to. Either of those I would say is probably the most consistent, whereas the Way of Shadow is a little bit harder to get that really good value out of because you got to focus on those ninja aspects. The best feats here is definitely ability improvement, as it often always is, to increase your dexterity and your constitution constitution primarily, as we talked about earlier, their importance, and strength obviously isn't too bad to grab there if you've just got extra points to get into a positive number or even number. And then you can't go wrong with Tavern Brawler either. So when you make an unarmed attack or improvised weapon or throw something, which we're mostly focused on the unarmed attack here, your strength modifier is added twice to the damage and attack rolls. So it'll definitely help you with a bit more consistency for the monk class, and you can obviously use that extra ability point to strength or constitution, whichever one gets you to an even number as well. But let's talk about some general class tips and information about this class. So the monk in general, regardless of your subclass that you pick, will be making a lot of attack actions every turn, both as bonus actions and normal attacks, whether you're attacking twice just in terms of your like extra attack, or then using those extra attacks as bonus actions for unarmed attacks. You've got a lot of freedom in combat to make a lot of actions, and it really helps the monk to pressure, say, whatever the highest threat enemy target is, because they can also stun or prone them, or using some of the 4 elements, they can add different effects as well. You've got options there. So typically in combat, you want to send your monk to whatever like the highest threat target is and try and stun lock them with some of the open hand mechanics if you went into that subclass, or using some of the 4 elements if you went into that route as well. If you're going to go the 4 elements subclass, think about grabbing the different effects that can manipulate enemies. So an example of this would be something like the Fist of the 4 Thunders, which can allow you to push enemies away from you, say essentially like push them down holes or push them off cliffs. That sort of thing can also be valuable to use. Water Whip can allow you to pull enemies towards you, so you don't have to make that distance for your melee attacks, or just knock them prone. That's also effective. That same thought process goes to like the open hand subclass as well, because you can use your Flurry of Blows to topple enemies, to knock them prone, or stagger them with Flurry of Blows stagger. So you want to be thinking about ways to essentially like stop the enemy from attacking or adding effects to them. Stunning Strikes is another way of doing this, which is another attack that you get part of your key points that you can use to consume. If you've used all your key points in a combat encounter, you can use Wholeness of Body as a class action, which you can use to get half of your key points back, as well as do some healing, which is a great way to keep your monks sustained because of their lack of armor, as well as potential healing elements to their overall kit as well. Similar to the rogue, you also have bonus actions that you can cast, like Disengage, Dash, and Patient Defense, which is unique to the monk class. But for the most part, you'll use those bonus actions to actually make unarmed attacks if you have attacked in that same turn. But the dash one could definitely come in handy, so you can actually get into melee range to make your actual action attack in that turn. But overall, like, you're just gonna punch things and make a lot of attack actions, stun them, prone them, move them around, and it's a really fun class because of that. Plus, you've also got a high amount of movement speed because of your unarmed movement. You can enhance your movement speed with different gear as well, so you'll be able to get close to enemies to be able to attack them. Compared to some of the other like melee frontlining sort of classes, I wouldn't have a monk as your only frontline melee character, because they can take a fair brunt of damage because they don't have the hugest amount of hit points. They also only have unarmored defense as like their main way to increase their armor class. So I would definitely have some sort of a alternative melee option, whether that's a fighter like Lazil or a paladin like on my main. Depends what that option is for you, but just take that into consideration, or even just ways to buff them, right? Whether that be with Shield of Faith to increase their armor class, or having a cleric or a bard sort of support them in that melee range. But it's just something to consider, that you definitely don't want them to take all of the damage in melee range, as they can go down very quickly and lose a lot of their health because they don't have a lot of sustain like via themselves, and they need to get that option either by someone else taking those hits or just by having someone heal them during those encounters. But that's sort of everything you need to know at a high level about the monk. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is NorZZa, and I hope you have a great day.